All right, good morning. Happy to be here to give a little bit of an update on the Pennsylvania Game Commission's prescribed fire drone program. Uh, this presentation is kind of follow-up to one myself and Steve Ferrari gave at the Digital Fire Council meeting 2 years ago. Just going to kind of delve into how we're working to improve training, some of the new toys we have in the agency to help us implement prescribed fire on a wider scale, and also increase safety and things of that nature. So a little bit of a brief history lesson about the Game Commission's prescribed fire drone program. We got our initial uh, Ignis equipped. So Ignis is the aerial ignition system that's produced by Drone Amplified out of Sidney, Nebraska. We got our first drone, which was a DJI drone, Matrix 600 Pro, which is still in use today in our North Central region, and I'll get to that a little bit later. But that was our first prescribed fire drone, and we had two pilots, myself and Steve. The day it was delivered, that was the first time each of us drove or actually flew a drone in our lives. So it was kind of trial by fire and learning what worked and what doesn't work. And that's what we're kind of working on making better now. So to start us off, how has the drone program changed since our 2022 update? One of the big ones was obviously FAA Part 107 certification is needed to fly drones for commercial purposes. And even though we are a state agency, it's still flying for your business, and it's not for personal reasons. You need to obtain Part 107 certification. So we've been able to increase our Part 107 certified pilots from 2 to 8. So that's been a big step up. Those people range from foresters to land managers to people on our habitat crews. So really, really wide ranging in our Habitat Bureau. And also the number of regions with Part 107 certified pilots has increased as well. So initially, when I worked as a forester in our Southeast region, it was just Steve and I in Region 6. But now we also have Part 107 certified pilots in the North Central, Northeast, and Southwest regions. And there's also a lot of interested employees that are looking to pursue Part 107 certification. So I had mentioned the old DJI 600 Pro, our first drone with the aerial ignition system on it. We now have, since last spring, we purchased two more additional drones. They're a little bit different, but the aerial ignition system is the same. So we've been able to scale up that way as well. And then also, once Steve and I were kind of the initial pilots who were grandfathered in, so to speak. But once we started having more people become interested and more regions wanted to become part of the program, we need to kind of have a process to follow to be able to train people so things were consistent. So after attending a drone prescribed fire conference in Ohio 2 years ago, we started following the NWCG position task book for unmanned aerial systems pilot. I'm not sure why that's playing like that, but we started following that just so we had something consistent. So we're not actually certified NWCG pilots because there's some courses which are actually really, really difficult to take right now because there's kind of low capacity, and I'll touch on that later. But we are following the task book, and everybody who's trained, just like any other position, needs to have that completed. So another thing we'll touch on here in the program, we're currently evaluating the feasibility of deploying small, rapidly deployable drones, because obviously these fire drones equipped with ignition systems are very, very large. When fully loaded, they can be up to 55 pounds. So it's not really an event. You can't be really spontaneous with it. Say you're at a fire, just kind of like the presentation yesterday with the fire that was outside of the box. If you didn't have the drone in the air already, it could take you up to 20, 25 minutes to set one of these drones up. So having a different tool available to our prescribed fire managers will be really, really important. important. So it's something, they could just grab out of the back seat of a truck and have it up in the air in 20 to 30 seconds. So that's something we're looking at as well. And kind of exciting news for us, we're going to get our first test small drone here in 2024, so we can see if the model we've picked out will actually be usable for what we're looking to do with it. So now we're going to get a little deeper into pilot training. Just like I said before, standardizing and having a set of benchmarks for pilots to hit is going to be really important as we have more prescribed fire drones in the field. So like I said before, Steve and myself, we kind of learned on our own by trial and error, which was good because we learned a lot of things not to do. But there really wasn't a resource internally that we could really reach out to and help each other out to learn. It was just ourselves. So that was a valuable part of the process, so we could learn not what to do. But it kind of became apparent last spring once we had 3 more people become Part 107 certified, that things were going to need to be standardized. So in addition to completing a task book that I mentioned earlier, all pilots who wish to fly on prescribed fires as a UASP, unmanned aerial systems pilot, must accrue at least 2 hours of flight time. Of course, complete the task book and have it signed off by our fire program manager, and also have at least 3 training operation periods on prescribed fires. And then the final bullet point there at the bottom that might be hard to see, final evaluation must occur on a moderate complexity fire. So for us, that could be mainly our forested prescribed fires, but also some of our complex grasslands. Because one of the things we've really learned so far with the drone, traditionally burning our herbaceous habitats, we've had smaller burn units that are kind of like small postage stamps across our state game land system. We've been able to combine with, a lot of the grassland restoration for grassland obligate bird species, removing those fence rows and burning larger grassland complexes. Obviously, there's some complexity there with internal igniters. If you have a wind shift or something like that, it could be dangerous. So the drone allows us to kind of scale up our grassland burning operations. So just a brief overview of the NWCG task book. I learned when I was putting this presentation together a couple days ago that there's actually an update to this task book. It was originally released, I believe, in January of 2018. So it was just updated recently, and now it's a standalone task book just for pilots. Before, it included multiple position titles like crew leader and drone module leader and things of that nature. So it's a little bit more straightforward which tasks should be used for drone pilots. So yeah, like I said, it's a little more applicable to our prescribed fire ignition program. Before there was, really, tasks that didn't really relate to what we were doing with drones. Things that like flying the drone and communicating when air ops is on scene and things of that nature, which obviously in a wildland fire environment is very, very important. But for us, it was something we really couldn't, it was a box we couldn't check in a lot of cases. Also, the number of tasks required for the pilot were reduced from 43 to 36. And like I said, they're much more straightforward now. So as far as the actual NWCG pilot qualification requirements, there is the list of courses that you would need. S373 is one of the big ones for UAS. I believe last I was aware of it, there's only 3 people in the nation who are certified to be able to train or actually conduct that program. So capacity right now is a big issue. And mainly that's more right now they're just, allowing U.S. Forest folks to kind of participate in those classes. So that's kind of a bottleneck right now if you would actually like to be NWCG certified as a pilot. So just going over our equipment again, this is kind of a similar slide to our presentation from 2022. This was the first drone equipped with the Ignis ignition system. And again, I'm no PowerPoint expert, but I'm not sure why it's playing like that. So this is the DJI Matrix 600 Pro. And yeah, it was purchased in March of 2021, and it's still in use, which we're really, really lucky for that. I actually had our first crash with a drone, so it's pretty easily repairable the way they build these things. It's a very, very modular design. If you rip a rotor off for a motor on the end of one of the rotor arms, it can be fixed relatively quickly, which was great. And it wasn't a violent crash. It was something that happened on an LZ when we were actually changing a rotor that was loose. We ended up putting it on upside down. So now we know to look at the spin direction of the motors, but that's how you learn. So now we double check that anytime we do something like that. So this drone's actually headquartered in our North Central region right now with Aaron Tyson, who is the UASP in the North Central region. And it is nearing the end of its life cycle. And when I say nearing, probably in the next year or two, it's going to need to be taken out of service. It's logged 75 flight hours on prescribed fires, and that number might not seem like much, but with a large industrial drone like this and just the weight it's carrying, it receives a lot of wear and tear on a regular basis. Same way too, some of the app updates that come from Drone Amplified and the way it talks to the DJI drone, some of that's going to become obsolete here over the next couple of years, because DJI doesn't really even produce a lot of parts for the 600 anymore, because that drone was discontinued sometime late in 2021. So the drone that's currently for sale by Drone Amplified as part of the package with the Ignis system is the Free Fly Out to X. So they transitioned to, son of a gun. They transitioned to a different drone company and model, primarily because over federal lands, you can't fly drones that aren't Blue UAS certified, meaning that all the system software and implements on the drone are either made in America or made in an allied country. So of course DJI is the industry leader, but they are a Chinese company. So there's some data sensitivity issues there and things of that nature. So since Drone Amplified's main customer is the U.S. Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management, they transitioned to an American-made drone. So it's made by Free Fly Systems, which is out of the state of Washington. And we were lucky enough to purchase 2 of these drones that were delivered in March of 2023. It's been a little bit of a learning curve initially. When we first started using them, we weren't 100% sure if we liked them as much as the DJI drone. But I think once we gained experience and conducted, subsequent prescribed fires with them, we're now very, very comfortable with these drones as well. They're just a little bit different of an animal. So we currently have these drones headquartered in our Southeast and Northeast regions. The Southeast currently has 3 PGC UASP pilots, and the Northeast region has 1 PGC UASP pilot. So, and like I mentioned, it's a Blue UAS drone. It has some limitations. Probably one of the main ones we've learned with it, the connectivity between the control station and the drone itself, it's a little bit more limited, because obviously we're flying these beasts with visual line of sight, so we're keeping eyes on it at all times. So your view shed's really important. With the DJI drone, we could fly, up to 2 miles pretty reliably with no connectivity issues. With the Free Fly drone, it's more like 1.5 miles or a little bit less. So the nice thing is these drones are semi-autonomous when you're actually up in the air and igniting. If you do have a connectivity issue, you can pre-program it to either return home or land in place. So that's up to you which one you would choose. And I do have just some approximate costs at the bottom there. The drone itself, approximately $20,000. The Ignis systems, right around $30,000, and the Workswell camera, which is thermal enabled, is right around $15,000. And that's probably been one of the biggest improvements over the initial drone package that Drone Amplified sells. With that new camera, you have up to a 10x optical zoom, which is really, really helpful. If you're looking, at a hot spot or, trying to see what forces on the ground are doing, if they need, reinforcements and things of that nature. So I just wanted to cover this again, because it's, if you've never done it, it's kind of odd at first, and it was odd for us at the Game Commission when we first, integrated drones into our ignition team. Uh, and as you can see here, I have a fire organization chart on the left side of the screen. And the way it's worked best for us in most cases, as far as with ignitions, all, ignition of the burn unit along the control lines, those igniters are kind of, they're under the control of the squad bosses that you have on your fire. And now obviously they're communicating closely with the firing boss who's responsible for the drone pilot and the drone, as far as coordinating, but that's kind of just the way it works best. So the firing boss develops the ignition plan, focusing on pretty much your transect spacing and your sphere spacing. You can kind of almost envision it and think of it the same way you would if you were telling internal igniters to, use point source ignition and drop a dot every 30 yards or something like that. So when a firing boss who's never worked with a drone first jumps into it, it can be a little bit overwhelming. But once they kind of just think about it, almost like ground-based ignitions, becomes pretty intuitive pretty quickly. So once they've the firing boss has developed the ignition plan and talked about it with the burn boss and squad bosses, and everybody's good with it, then the firing boss instructs the pilot to load the ignition plan into the Ignis app, and that's basically just based off those sphere and transect spacings like I mentioned earlier. So the squads, of course, handle the direct ignition along fire breaks to establish adequate black on the downhill and uphill side of the burn unit. And then when the squads, when squad ignitions reach established trigger points, internal ignition with the drone can commence. So obviously communication is very, very important, at a burn day briefing, and then also when the fire is actually active. And so to kind of show you what I mean by trigger point, what you would establish at a briefing based off the conditions, this following slide of a burn unit on State Game Lands 210 in Dauphin County, you can see on that particular day we had a northwest wind. Topography is relatively flat for the Ridge and Valley in Pennsylvania. So our test fire was on the southeast corner of the unit. We had Squad A proceed to the north along that Kilo Indigo line, and then Squad B proceed to the west over towards Alpha. And then once those two squads arrived at India and Alpha, and they were comfortable with the secured black along the control lines, and typically that's going to be 50, 75, 100 feet, depending on your fuel types. Then internal ignition can commence. It's pretty similar to if you're actually going to send internal igniters through the unit. Say if you're going to use strip head fire and go from Juliet over to Bravo, it's kind of the same deal. You would pretty much drag fire along the same lines as I have highlighted on this map here. So just a quick overview where the drones have been used and where they've really opened things up for us. They're really, really handy, obviously, as you can all probably envision, for units with rough terrain, poor visibility for internal igniters, and also where you're in flashy fuels, because probably one of the most dangerous aspects of prescribed fire is internal ignition. Obviously, there's some risks there. If igniters are becoming trapped, or if there's a communication breakdown where someone puts fire into a place earlier than they're expecting. So being able to fly over top the unit and obviously do aerial ignition really, really improves safety. Also, they've been really, really useful for burn units where internal ignition is not safe or practical, and some of those habitat types will be, scrub oak stands and scrub oak pitch pine barrens where you might be trying to use longer fire return intervals. That stuff gets 8 to 10 years since your last fire, and it's dog hair thick, and it's pretty much the tops of the shrub layer is at eye level. Can become very, very difficult to communicate and see each other when you're doing internal ignition. Then obviously as well, patrolling fire breaks when visibility is reduced. You could have a really, really smoky fire break on the downwind side of a burn unit. You can put up a drone with a thermal camera, and you can see right through that smoke and see if there's any hot spots outside your control lines. Also for sizing up slop overs and spot fires outside of the unit, and it can also help quickly direct crews to something that's outside the box. Then also, one thing that we're just starting to get into would be to monitor fire behavior during operations. Uh, that's kind of a big avenue that we're hoping to use drones for, to where you can almost, have an approximate burn intensity, what's going on inside the unit, and also geo-reference those points so you can come back to them later and assess objectives and with treatment monitoring. So now just some photos to drive this home. That's actually a scrub oak stand on State Game Lands 38 in the Northeast region. That's been about 10 years post-fire. So previously on their initial entry into this burn unit, they had to go in and use a forestry head on a skid steer to mow that down. And this is actually a snowshoe hare site where snowshoe hares occur in Monroe County. And you pretty much turn it into a moonscape, then treat it with prescribed fire, so the hares don't move back into that site until 7 to 10 years post-fire. This second entry, we were able to burn it, and all that structure, obviously the scrub oak was top killed, but that structure was still on site, so that the hares were able to continue using that site almost continuously over time. So also some of our savanna woodland restoration sites with flashier fuels. They're very, very handy for those type of sites. That's just a picture. You can kind of see how precise the placement of the spheres can be. It's almost with that particular burn, we kept our sphere spacing very, very tight, and that way we were taking our transects into the wind, so it was just almost like sending an igniter into the wind on the ground and having flanking fire in your burn unit. So you can kind of see those lines coming together and starting to spread out. Also, some of the other equipment we use with the drones, you can tether your controller to a TV screen, and that's actually a squad boss looking at a slop over on a prescribed fire. So he can kind of visualize what the crews on the ground are talking about and think about what resources to send there. Very helpful for that. And I'll kind of pick up the pace here. This picture is actually from a lift, so a portable lift, because obviously you need to maintain visual line of sight. So we're in Pennsylvania, we're around 60% forested, and trees obstruct your view. So sometimes if you can just gain 30 to 40 feet in a lift of some sort, it can help you pull off burning a certain area, because without this lift, the unit that we're burning right here wouldn't have been possible. And I'll skip this because it's kind of similar from a different presentation. So real quick, two videos here that were taken by Aaron Tyson at his last training period. You can kind of see one of the things you use the camera for on the Ignis drone. If you point it directly towards the ground, you can kind of use that as a double check that the system's actually functioning properly. So there you can see the spheres being placed into the burn unit. And it just helps you give that extra security that things are working well. Then here is a video on that same unit right near twilight. You can kind of see the crew on the ground there on the left side of the screen. They just lit that fire break off along the road, and you can see some of the spheres developing internally in the unit. So Just real quick here, some prescribed fire statistics from the first year we used the prescribed fire drone. Just kind of gives you a sense of, how many spheres per acre we're roughly doing, the size of the units that we're burning, and so on. So real quick to finish up here, our drone program goals for the next 2 years. We would like to train at least 4 additional drone pilots to become PGC certified for burn operations across the state. We would like to have 1 additional pilot in the southeast, northeast, and north central regions become trained, and also have our first pilot in our southwest region. We'd like to have a fire drone headquarter in at least 1 additional PGC region. So that would take us up to 4 of our 6 field regions. To have plans in place for drone fire expansion into the remaining PGC regions if there is regional need demonstrated and there's interest there. And we'd also like to standardize a digital procedure for documenting pre-flight takeoff tasks and also flight recording requirements post-flight. That's kind of integrated into our PGC GIS portal, because currently a lot of that's either done on paper or on a Microsoft Teams page with a spreadsheet. So this would be something on a phone or mobile device that someone can input quickly. It would also have spatial data of where you're actually flying and things like that. So that'll be very helpful. And we would also like to complete the development of a deployment plan for 2 rapidly deployable drones in each region for forestry and habitat staff for fire monitoring, but also habitat monitoring and other programs.